Hi, this is Paul. I want to do a little bit more reflecting on the whole Jordan Peterson thing. The video I just released today, which would be probably yesterday for you if I release this on Tuesday, about the message making in week. A lot of good comments in there. Very much appreciate reading all of your thoughts, both in agreement and disagreement with me. Bethel, who some of you know, she did the Chicago event with me. Bethel McGrew messaged me some things on Twitter that I thought were really helpful, and yeah, let's just start there, and because let's just start there. She says in response to my video, what's odd is that even in some of these message videos, the actually rather centrist Jordan is still coming through. Not a particularly right-wing Jordan. For example, the message to Muslims is, if anything, naive about Islam. And I think Bethel makes an excellent point there. And as I said in the videos, it was sort of hard for me to nail down exactly what troubled me about the message videos. And I think a lot of you were really helpful in that in the comment section. And I think Greg Hurwitz, I'm going to want to talk a little bit more about him in that video too, in this video, because there's a lot going on here. Let me finish up what Bethel wrote here, because I thought it was really helpful. One problem I see is that now he's being elevated to the level of pundit, and I questioned her about elevated. But again, as I've said many times, and I know people push back on this too, he really was exiled from his two main vocations, which was that of university professor of psychology of both undergrad and graduate students. He had a very successful career as an academic, published a great number of papers, was respected in his field, worked in a variety of different areas. All of that is just true of Jordan. And because of everything that happened with C16, he became an exiled, domiciled in Vervakian language. And then also he lost his clinical practice, and he's the subject of 10 lawsuits that came out in the Greg Hurwitz video. And he has been rather severely attacked. And so he has written some books, and those books, especially 12 Rules for Life, sold very, very well. And so, he doesn't have to worry for his financial future. But one of the things that I see, and this is true of both ends of the spectrum, I regularly work with people who live on disability. And this is something I'm a little skeptical about, sort of universal basic income, is that I see people who basically, on disability, they get the sort of a minimum life, sort of a minimum amount of money to keep body and soul together, but there's nothing meaningful about living on the dole. And now Jordan has plenty of money, and so, but just look at the kind of guy he is. He needs to do what's meaningful, and there's a whole bunch of things around the world that are meaningful for him to talk about. And so I think Bethel gets this right, that he's sort of left being a pundit. Now, there's a lovely young couple that comes to church at Living Stones. They drive a ways. I won't out them by their names, but if you come on Sunday morning, you can meet them. They're really lovely people. And the gentleman pointed me to this video with Brett talking to Steve Patterson, which was a very interesting video. I watched the whole thing this morning. And Brett is another example of someone who's exiled, and now he's got his Dark Horse podcast, and now he's not living on Jordan Peterson money, and it's the YouTube, of course, has paid promotions on some of these videos, and when I watch these guys hawking mattresses or something, yeah, I don't think it's elevated, and there's in many ways, even though there's also sort of a loss of focus that has happened to them. So one problem I see that he's elevated to the level of pundit. He's rather earnestly thinking, okay, I need to start weighing in on 50 different things right now, right? Am I doing this right? Somebody needs to tell him it's okay not to weigh in on all the things, and that's true. And I don't know if he's weighing in on all the things, but there is definitely an element of and question of focus with respect to Jordan right now. there's lots of things that draw our attention. And I think for Jordan, because he sees these big numbers on his social media platform, and again, they're not massive numbers. I mean, 5 million is big, but it's nothing compared to other platforms, and thinks, well, I should go out and do something about these wrongs that I see, and use my audience or use my platform to do this. And I think this is part of what's underneath Twitter, and his continuing to go back and fight that war with the powers that be at Twitter over his suspension. So, and then I said, elevated isn't the right word. He's still trying to figure out his calling since he was exiled from the university in his clinical practice. There was a really interesting section in this video on sort of losing one's way. This section of the video talks about trade-offs and the fact that what tends to happen is people get elevated to a certain status and they lose the kind of contact that makes them, that keeps them fresh. Now, it seems sort of contradictory to the point I was making before about sort of trying to address everything, but let's listen to some of this.
You probably know nothing about my biology, but my specialty is trade-offs. And my claim is that although biological trade-offs have been long recognized, that we are missing the fact that there is actually a set of rules that govern them. They are not haphazard things that emerge here or there, that we can actually specify. We can talk about the rules that govern trade-offs, and that I think essentially every big unanswered question in biology that I'm aware of can be readily answered if you approach it through an understanding of how trade-offs have to work, the fact that there's a taxonomy of trade-offs, and so you may be looking at different trade-offs. But
this gets into constraints. I'm sure some of you, natural law will come to the fore when you think about this. Actually, I thought about Peugeot quite a bit in this part of the conversation, because they're both sort of settling in on patterns that are represented beyond specific, let's say, academic or disciplinary domains.
But in any case, the point is, how did I get there? Well, I did what you just did with MMA. I used some disciplines that I knew well that were complex but simpler than biology, right? So photography was a very useful one for me. Aviation was a very useful one. Bicycles. These were places where there was enough complexity for there to be trade-offs, but there wasn't so much complexity that it just got lost in the noise. And so if you can extrapolate from those areas and then say, well, all right, here's how it works in a bicycle.
Yes.
How would that look in the world of birds? It was very clarifying.
And so this is taking from the far broader patterns of reality and then bringing them back to, let's say, your area of focus.
Yes, so definitely. I definitely have similar story there, where a lot of my interest, not just in academic stuff, is in, let's say, extracurricular learning. So I've been fascinated by, chess and the jujitsu stuff and some musical stuff. And I've got a ton of hobbies. And what I found fairly early on is a lot of the patterns that you discover in chess are directly applicable to jujitsu. I mean, they're practically the same thing if you just orient them a little bit differently instead of...
This is practically the symbolic world without icons or anything else going on here, what these two are doing.
Chess pieces, you're dealing with limbs, and that this is true of music. If you develop some musical skill, you're going to discover patterns that are generally applicable.
Sorry, I just needed a notepad here. It's an issue of variation.
That I like. I can very much relate to doing that in the middle of a conversation. Oh, someone's at the door.
It's on a theme.
Yeah.
And the way I, my note card in my mind for, the thing I say to students to get them to sort of start developing that understanding is that the universe is composed of a very tiny number of types of objects, right? Just even the fundamental physics. It's not made of very many things, right? But it's obviously hugely variable. So if you're going to build a universe as complex as this one out of a tiny number of Legos, you're going to get some themes that repeat, right? And so being able to spot them between domains is effectively, it's like a cheat code.
It is, absolutely.
Right?
And they build on each other. So
Right.
you can learn skills way faster just by having high skill in a totally unrelated domain, which is also one of the reasons why I bulk.
This sort of maps onto Scott Adams, the one book that he's written that I've read cover to cover about success. And he talks about that, about when you're young, do lots of different things, because all those different things that you do when you get older will really help you just bring more to whatever it is that you have to do when you get older. It's basically just growing in wisdom.
So hard when people are skeptical of interdisciplinary knowledge and claims. They're like, oh no, you got to stay in your lane. I'm thinking you got to do the opposite. You got to swerve everywhere you can, like get the biggest truck that's taking up as many lanes as you possibly can. That's a better way of learning.
So here's the reason that they're skeptical of interdisciplinary studies, is because interdisciplinary studies is a euphemism for lack of disciplinary studies.
Okay.
That's a great line.
There.
So they've got the wrong impression, but I agree with you that, I mean, and in fact, this is part of why I love evolutionary biology. Since all of biology is evolutionary, this is a license to transgress every disciplinary boundary, you know, until you get to inanimate objects, right? And so anyway, yes, I agree. What fucking lane, you know? Show me the lane marker and I'm going to cross it.
It sounds a whole lot like Rick Rufus saying, oh, leg kicks. No, that doesn't take any skill. I don't want to deal with any of that. You keep the leg kickers in your own game.
Right. Well, and we saw this in COVID, and it was mind blowing, right? Because it was like, you know, these vaccines couldn't possibly be safe. Okay. Well, but you're not a vaccinologist. Okay, but I'm an evolutionary biologist, and the vaccinologists aren't epidemiologists, and the epidemiologists aren't virologists, and none of them are evolutionary biologists, right? And none of them are physiologists, and they aren't doctors. So the point is, everybody is out of whatever discipline they trained in most of the time in order to deal with something that has as many facets as COVID did. The only people who had a prayer of doing it well were either generalists who were capable of learning what they needed to know to understand the other disciplines, or clinicians who were in a position to see what actually took place with people, right? So you have,
and this is the key point right here, where you learn applied wisdom on the ground with all of the complexity and all of the synthesis that combinatorial explosiveness of reality brings to bear. And it's at that very basic level that you can really see the patterns. And this is exactly the problem that happens when you get up in a hierarchy and are no longer able to be with people.
I had some doctors who didn't have these other areas of specialty, but they could see the damn pattern, right? That worked. Or being a generalist who was capable of saying, well, all right, let me, here's a new family of viruses. I know nothing about how they work, but I can learn it.
Okay, so I don't know if we're ever going to talk about Dark Age stuff, but I gotta go on this line because it's so interesting.
Now, I thought the Lex Fridman conversation was really sweet. It was honest. Before I left, I played that little clip about love. This was I thought quite a powerful interview. It's interesting to compare this Lex Fridman interview with John Vervaeke's Lex Fridman interview. Now, of course, Vervaeke was sort of new. Lex seemed to have gone through Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, John's 50 video set. But one of the interesting comparisons between the two videos is that Jordan didn't really... You wouldn't get a sense of Jordan's program from his video. Now, maybe Jordan's program is out there, but part of what's happened with Jordan is, again, the loss of focus. And it's been my thesis all along that at the center of Jordan's heart, where he finds his deepest calling, I think, is rescuing individuals from nihilism. Okay, helping individuals sort themselves out and get on a better life. that can both be applied as a university professor, but especially as a clinical psychologist. And then in this video, there was all of this description about, well, what his life actually looks like now.
Well, I'm usually up by 7 and ready to go by 7:30 or 8. And
Coffee?
no,
Nothing.
steak and water.
How many times a day steak?
That's all I eat.
How many times?
3 or 4,
3 or 4.
depending on the day.
Steak and water.
Steak and sparkling water. Yeah, so
I did
monastic asceticism, man.
Well, I did the proper. I usually eat just once a day. I did the
Yeah, well, if you have to only eat one thing, could be worse. So anyways, I'm ready to go at 8 because we're generally moving.
What does moving mean?
Flying.
You're constantly
Flying somewhere.
Okay.
And we usually use private flights now because the commercial airlines aren't reliable enough, and you cannot not make a venue, right? So that's rule number 1 on a tour. You make the show.
And so he's flying private, probably rented jets with rented pilots, and so he's surrounded by the people he's surrounded by. And he is meeting other people, and again, he's had access to lots of different kinds of people than he ever had access before. But he go back to the observation that Brett made, that often it's the people on the ground, the people whose interaction with a sample of humanity that is far more like the masses of humanity than politicians, celebrities, these kinds of people.
Yeah.
So everything, and then rule number 2 is anybody who causes any trouble on the tour is gone because there is 0 room for error. Now, no, there's 0 room for unnecessary, unaddressed error. So because there's going to be errors. The guys I have around me now, if they make a mistake, they fix it right away. So, and that's great.
There's a lot of people relying on you to be there, so you have to be there.
And again, this is sort of the this is getting rid of chaos. That's basically what's happening.
Like 4,000 people typically.
Yeah.
So then I'm on the plane, and I usually write, or often, because there's no internet on the plane, and that's a good use of time. So I'm writing a new book, so I write on the plane.
Typing or handwriting?
Typing. Yeah, typing. And
I'd like to know the computer. I think he's doing Mac right now. He used to have a Surface product, which I personally endorse, but
then we land and we go to, it's usually early afternoon by then, we go to a hotel. It's usually a nice hotel. It's not corporate. I don't really like corporate hotels. My secretary and one of my logistics guys has got quite good at picking kind of adventurous hotels, boutique hotels. They're usually in the old parts of the city, especially in Europe, somewhere interesting. And so we go there, and then lunch usually, and sometimes that's an air fryer and a steak in the hotel room, and I leave a trail of air fryers behind me all across the world. And then Tammy and I usually go out and have a walk or something and take a look at the city, and then I have a rest for like an hour and a half or an hour, half an hour.
Like a nap? Or
yeah,
just
nap. I have to sleep for 20 minutes, and that's about all I can sleep, but I need to do that in the late afternoon.
that refreshes your mind?
Yeah, that wakes me up again for the evening. And then Tam has to sleep longer. She's still recovering from her illness, and so she has to sleep longer in the afternoon, and that's absolutely necessary for both of us, or things start to get frayed. And so then we go to the venue, and then I usually sit for an hour. If I'm going to lecture, I've been doing a lot of Q&As, and that's a little easier, but if I'm going to lecture, I have to sit for an hour, and then I think, okay, what question am I trying to investigate? I have to have that, so that's the point. What mystery am I trying to unravel? It's usually associated with one of the rules in my book, because technically it's a book tour, but each of those rules is an investigation into an ethic, and each of them points to a deeper sort of mystery in some sense, and there's no end to the amount it can be explored. And so I have the question. My question might be something like, put your put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
And it goes on from here. But I wanted to highlight just how different his life is now from being a university professor when he's with students. Okay, when you're with students, you get a sense of the coming wave that's coming into the culture, and students are going to be chaotic. They're gonna, they're not going to have their assignments done. They're semi-socialized. I mean, it's a very active thing, and you're working with patients in your clinical practice. You're devoting a tremendous amount of energy to the minutia of people who are really struggling with very basic things. All of that stuff orients you. This section of the video, Brett was talking about his mentors, and what's the other guy's name? Steve Peterson starts talking about popularizers, and I thought this was really perceptive and helpful.
So I think that is a consistent pattern that we would see across disciplines, where the people that the general public and maybe undergrad students would consider as greats aren't. I think generally when you look closely at different disciplines, it looks like there are a few brilliant original minds that are coming up with original concepts, doing interesting work. And then there is another type of mind, which is the articulator, somebody that can skillfully talk about the concepts, do a interview for PBS that becomes that gets the cultural designation of this here as an intellectual, and then problems are caused from that moment, because what happens is, like, there is a complex social phenomenon that happens where people will start to take sides. And now there are going to be, it seems to be within academia as well, there are going to be defenders of the personality and critics of the personality. And then very shortly, it is difficult to carefully reason through ideas because people start playing a social game. And now, I mean, the COVID stuff was the incredible example of this, right? How many people who took a very strong position on either the vaccine or ivermectin or whatever do you think were genuinely sitting down on either side and thinking through the concepts carefully? And how?
Now, my point here isn't to judge the brilliance or lack of it of Jordan Peterson. My point is that this dynamic that he pointed out, I mean, if there's, again, comparing, let's say, the John Vervaeke conversation with Lex Fridman to Jordan Peterson's. Jordan is when Jordan came onto the scene, John Vervaeke said, it was like looking at the sun. I mean, he just, in 2018, he just tore through the culture in an especially brilliant way all of a sudden. And there were a lot of things that came into that. And he very much was a popularizer. I mean, he took Nietzsche and Jung and all of this stuff and just brought it right out into the culture. And there was sort of this massive explosion. That's what he was. But very quickly, the social game took over. And the point was no longer the points that he had made. The point was, are you for or against Jordan Peterson? Which is really a rather silly social game. Are you for or against a person? He's a human being. He has foibles. He has brilliances. He has all of these things. But then I want to go to this next clip. Both of these clips I sort of posted on Twitter. Now, Steve Peterson makes a very interesting argument about martial arts and mixed martial arts and competition between martial arts, and there's sort of a hierarchy that develops. Again, this conversation was very Pageauian, even though Jonathan Pageau was not mentioned, and a lot of the stuff that Jonathan Pageau would bring up was sort of far away from this. All of the hierarchy, all of the strengths and weaknesses of symbolism were very much behind a lot of what they were talking about. And so they were talking about martial arts, and when the martial arts started fighting each other, and grappling very much emerges. But there's also, between these two guys, very much of a modernistic framework that both of them were very much working in, and I think to a certain degree captured by. And the irony, of course, about the martial arts thing is like, well, if you get outside of kickboxing or karate or and you get to the certain kind of judo, then you see what's at the top of the hierarchy. But the question is, of course, at the top of what hierarchy? Because if someone brings a knife or a gun or another buddy with a gun, I mean, then sort of your entire mixed martial arts thing sort of breaks down. Oh, because that has rules around it. Like, yeah, we're not bringing weapons in, and we're not poisoning you or going to, jump you the night before and smother you in your sleep or anything like that in order to win the fight. So, but then they get into this section about the greats and about...
I had no ability to counter, and he beat me. That sort of invalidates me. And that implies all of the social hierarchy around my dojo and all of the conferences that I give. I thought I was an expert, but when the rubber meets the road, I guess I'm not as good as I thought. Okay, that to me seems like exactly the circumstance of intellectuals and academics, especially over the course of the 20th century as academia has grown. You have these different disciplines that are hyper specialized, and you have a bunch of prestige within the discipline and the great teacher that everybody reveres, but it turns out they're not actually conceptually, philosophically, generally skilled. And when they're met with interdisciplinary criticism, they just don't have the tools available to defend themselves, if you will.
Okay, now I think I know what happened.
Okay.
And by the way, love the jiu-jitsu analogy. We'll come back to
cool
what that means in a minute here, but here's what I learned from Jerry Coyne and Richard Dawkins, which is the arbitrary reward structure that exists in academia awarded them something which made them feeble in old age. They weren't necessarily feeble. I can't speak to Coyne as well, but I can say Dawkins of 1976 really had what it took to become a great. I truly believe that. But when you become successful in this modality, and that success brings you into a realm where you're dealing with only the cream of the crop, and everybody in the cream of the crop crowd has the same situation, which is, look, if we start throwing punches, that could be bad. So if we agree to kind of pull our punches and be nice to each other, then, we last. And so the point is, I think what really happened to Richard Dawkins is that he escaped the zone of competition that would have kept him sharp, right? And the thing that did not happen to Dick Alexander was that never happened to him because he collected around him the best students in the department who, they were all young guns who would say whatever they thought needed to be said. There was no, etiquette about not, attacking an idea that Dick had said, right? So the point is, he stayed sharp because he surrounded himself with people who didn't believe in those games. And I think what I really ran into with Dawkins was that he did not recognize, maybe because I'm not young anymore. I was a young gun when I was young, and now I'm older, but the point is, I still believe that my field is fucked up. I still believe there are big discoveries that are staring us in the face that we are not seeking. And he was not prepared because he was telling himself the story that there was no next generation of really good biologists because we didn't need one. Yeah. He didn't recognize somebody who knew some things he didn't know, where he should have been fascinated by that. And I was surprised to find that he wasn't.
Okay, this pattern is almost identical to martial arts stuff. Like what you just so people understand, like when you see a pattern that is in wildly different areas and it's pretty much the same pattern, it's valuable to get a good model of what that pattern looks like. Okay, so this is what happens in martial. This is like a well-known thing.
Again, it's so Peugeotian
in the world of martial arts. People will get some sort of, they'll get a black belt in karate or something. And then they're curious. They've seen some of this jiu-jitsu stuff. So they go, maybe they practice karate for 8 years and they go into the jiu-jitsu gym and they get their butts handed to them by newbies. kids that are smaller than them, that have been training for a year and a half, beat the sophisticated black belt that walks in the door. And then they are presented with the question, do I continue to get my butt handed to me by people that clearly know something I don't, or do I say, no, it's not for me, and I'm gonna stick in my in the area in which I'm skilled? That is a
I'm going to stay in my lane.
well-known phenomenon. It happened to Chuck Norris. That's an interesting story. He's like a real martial artist in addition to being an actor, and he was skilled in striking arts. The same thing happened to him, got destroyed by jiu-jitsu, and said, oh geez, I'm going to stick around these people because they're closer to truth than I was. So I think so you're sort of describing the same phenomenon, that he had success and then he was presented with a choice. Do I go back do I go swim with the sharks again, or do I continue the path without that sharp competition?
Yeah, I mean, and in fact,
and that does sort of break down, because of course, okay, well, now you're going to go learn jiu-jitsu, okay, but then you meet a guy on the street with a gun and you get shot. So it's kind of like the Indiana Jones move. And the question, of course, is, what is the game of games? How does this all really then roll out? To go back to Bethel's comments to me on Twitter, well, I just meant to add. I just meant to be meant being added to the Daily Wire stable, which is a stable of pundits. I mean, he wasn't trying to write articles about things like the Russia-Ukraine conflict before. That's the realm of punditry, and it's all very earnestly motivated because he's conscious that he tends to ramble. So in his mind, I think he is trying to be more punchy and effective and reach more people by writing and then reading. And in the same way, the same temptation that besets all content creators who are gifted with a moderate-sized platform, but then you have to figure out whether criticism is legitimate or just coming in from people who are put off by your political angle. The Hurwitz conversation was interesting because it seemed to be a blend of both. So I think Bethel really puts her finger on something here that and I think to a degree, Brett Weinstein, Peter Boghossian is just sort of starting his new mission here. He seems to be sort of continuing to sort of focus on the anti-woke stuff. But Brett, of course, COVID went all around with that, and people took both sides. Some people, that's sort of the division, the separation of rebel wisdom from Brett Weinstein, because David didn't respect the way Brett went in on it. And now, of course, they're just kind of out there and losing focus. So this video with Greg Hurwitz and Jonathan Peugeot was just so interesting. He opens with these two letters from CEOs, which he read. And again, you gotta give the guy points for making this video, because a lot of people at this level of status just sort of turns away from the criticism, but he values his friendship with Greg. And for me, this is part of the reason why, well, again, in literal internet land, you can't both critique something and not be its enemy. As Steve Peterson said, that social game kicks over. And I think you should resist that social game, quite frankly, because people are full of contradictions and missteps. And if you actually have relationships with real people, especially family members, I watch people sometimes sort of divorce themselves from a family member for really stupid reasons. I'm not going to talk to them again. Some noble, some nobility that they're somehow going to hold a grudge. It's just so patently foolish. So he begins with really good letters from a couple of CEOs, and then he starts sort of going through, thinking out loud. And again, that's usually when Jordan's at his best, thinking about loud about what happened and introducing the video.
For the side of the political spectrum that I'm more alienated from, because they've been very tricky. And so the way you think them through is to take a look at your own behavior and to rake yourself over the coals in the most fundamental way. And one of the reasons I like to talk to Greg is because he's very, very good at making that kind of fine discrimination, and he's a very good advocate for the side of the political spectrum that I'm more alienated from, because they've been after me for about 6 years. And Jonathan is just eminently reasonable in these regards and also quite deep. And so Greg and I decided that he would interrogate me. That's one way of thinking about it. Or help me interrogate myself. That's probably more accurate. About how to draw lines in public about contentious things without alienating the people that you're trying to draw lines in relationship to so badly that it's no longer possible to communicate with them.
Boom. Right there. There's the goal. There's the goal. And this is what he's working for. And again, if you look at, well, maybe I'll play a little bit of it. And I am worried that Tom Holland's publicist will complain about how often I've used the cover of his book as a thumbnail in my sermons. When Glenn said, "Would you like to do a thing with Tom Holland?" I said, "Absolutely. If you don't listen to The Rest is History, it's my favorite podcast." And it's not just because I'm a fan of history, and it's not just because they have interesting speakers. It's because, you know what's at the heart of that podcast? It's friendship. And it comes through every episode. That friendship piece is really vital. And that's what comes through this conversation. And if you have friends, you know, friends go beyond your political orientation. You can talk about politics, you can argue politics, but friends help each other out to see the truth with all of the complexities that we have.
It's funny because I think one of the issues is that, I think even for you, Greg, is that everybody feels like you have a role to play. And I think a lot of this is playing up against this role because you...
And I think what Jonathan says is right. Part of what I think brought the supernova in 2016, 17, and 18 that was Jordan was people had a sense that there was going to be an openness that we haven't had before. There was going to be a light that we haven't had before. And I talked about this in the video where I talked about sort of the Rebel Wisdom Jordan Peterson breakup, that at that point we sort of had a high tide and people could sort of go between little nooks in the tidal pools and traverse different tidal pools. And Jordan was key in that.
You are this catalyst for transformation. You have been this catalyst for transformation. And everybody kind of sees that. And when they see you straying from that role, one way or another, they're wondering what's going on. And sometimes I think people forget that you're a person that also slips and slides and messes up and does
Especially on Twitter.
Especially on Twitter. But there is nonetheless a reality about the fact that you do seem to play some kind of role. And that if... So it's good to talk about it. And I think people...
It'd be good to play it right.
That's right.
And that role should be flexible. And part of it for me is that the role that you're playing has become too rigid in certain ways. And it doesn't
That's the danger.
Yeah, and it doesn't match my conception of you, and it doesn't match what I think is strategically the best use of your talent and insight.
Yeah. Well, and so we want to wade into the platform issue too, because like if the issue is serious enough to be worth considering, then maybe it's too serious to say anything about on Twitter. One of the things I should say about those tweets, just to begin with, is I put out a lot of tweets, and some of them go absolutely nowhere, thank God, and then some of them explode, and it is by no means obvious to me in the least which of the things that I'm saying are going to go off like little bombs. And
that's a rather remarkable thing to say. You know, I make thumbnails and titles, and, you know, I play around with that, and you all know I play around with that. And there is always an element of surprise as what's going to go and what isn't, but, yeah.
So that's also a very weird thing about Twitter.
So if you were exposing yourself to a more robust range of ideas, it would be more obvious to you, is number one. So it's predictable.
And that gets again to the domicide, how he's lost that community of students, both undergraduate and graduate and colleagues. He's lost that. He's living in much more of a bubble. He's lost the orientation that's sitting in a room with someone who is deeply distressed because they can't handle an elevator, or they can't get a job, or they can't do what have you. All of that keeps you sane. And to lose that is, just having, a few friends in the room sort of poke at you, and to lose that is just so devastating.
Going off in one way, first of all. And second of all, you and I had the conversation.
Maybe it might be that the people who are responding to it are more likely to all come from one side. So, but your point's still well taken.
Well, you can hear, let's call it dog whistles. And by that, I don't mean the connotation that it is actually a dog whistle for something that is racist or fascist.
Right, so it's not
people
conspiratorial.
Hear it as such.
Right.
You can tune your ear to that all the way around the spectrum. Now, not perfectly, but your ear is not tuned to to language that you're using and how it translates. And in some ways, part of why I'm talking to you is by dint of our relationship. In some ways, I think I might be the best point of contact for what everybody to the left of you thinks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
I think that's true.
And so, right now, like, everybody to the left of you does not have a high view of where you are and what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's problematic because we've spent a lot of time bridge building. And also, that's not you. You're not a sort of rigid conservative. And I don't mean all conservatives are rigid. I mean, but you're like a Northern Albertan outlaw biker. Like, that's a big part of your persona.
You have a blue suit.
Yeah, I mean, and you're like, there's whole aspects of you that are liberal, and it's the integration of the two parts.
God, it's so shameful.
It is shameful. That's right.
But that's what we've seen from him from the start. I mean, if you've been watching him as closely as I have, and again, I just see what leaks through this two-dimensional screen, but it's completely obvious that he's a complex human being, and that now all of what he has gone through has transformed him in some ways, and there are always positive and negative aspects of transformation in this.
But you can only hide so long.
It's like the feminine parts, too.
Yeah, that's right.
God. Yeah.
But so when it's the other thing, it's like it's not making sense, but you're also not talking to half of your people.
Well, so sometimes I've gone with Greg to Washington to talk to Democrats, and I've often asked Democrats that I've talked to, when the left goes too far, and they're usually unable to answer. And I've suggested that it's equity when they go too far, when they promote equity. And Greg has stepped in several times during these conversations when I'm objecting to equity to say, when you're talking about equity, the Democrats you're talking to don't hear the same thing because they just hear equality of opportunity, which, by the way, equity is definitely not.
Most Democrats. I mean, I'm not claiming that.
No.
Yeah.
No. But that's happened. That's happened directly while the conversations have been happening.
Yes.
And so there is this need for translation. Why don't we start with one of the actual tweets? We could start with the...
Okay, so if you haven't watched this video, this was, I thought, quite a remarkable video. In the middle of the video sort of focuses on a dream that Greg had, and then they dissect the dream, and it was fascinating. I listened to this quite intently on a train going up north in England. It's so funny sometimes when I listen to things where the video itself sort of gets contextualized by the other surroundings. Bethel notes, the Hurwitz conversation was interesting because it seemed like a blend of both. Greg would sometimes land a good point, and you could literally see Jordan blush in reaction. Then other times it became clear Greg was politically frustrated. And again, between friends, that's what happens. That's where it goes. So Bethel says Greg definitely got to talk a lot, which was also true. But I thought it was an important video. Part of what it left me to, though, was Peterson was, for me, a bit more enigmatic at the end of it. Because part of what, and I think Bethel's comment gets at this, part of what he's trying to do is sort of craft, and again, it's domicide. He's been dislocated. He's trying to figure out his calling and his mission now that these vocations that he has given his life to are no longer the means through which he pursues what I think is the core of his mission, which is to help individuals live better lives. That's, I think, at the core of his university work, both the academic psychological work and his work as a teacher. Because, some, as any of you who have been to university know, some at the university teach sort of because they have to, and what they're really interested is their academic pursuits. Others teach because they love to teach, and you could tell watching Jordan in the classroom, he cared about his students. He loved to teach, and I'm sure those of you who have had him as a lecturer have seen that, and some of you who have had him at a lecture who I've talked to personally have told me that he. And that's why he rented out the Bader Theater to do the biblical series, and that's why he went on TV. And I think part of the difficulty is that he has sort of lost his focus, whereas he wants to talk about when I was in the Netherlands, everyone was talking about the nitrogen crisis. He wants to talk about the Dutch farmers. He wants to talk about Canadian politics. And, some of you say, hey, it's Jordan, let him do what he wants. Well, I'm not getting in the way of him doing what he wants. Jordan's going to do what he wants anyway. But I think if the center of I think he's going to need something to really bring focus to his vocation if he's going to achieve what I think we really hoped he would achieve in terms of continuing to help individual people do better in life. And I think that is, again and again, I think that is where his heart has landed. And I think that is what's behind his books. But if he wants to do something like this, I think he's going to have to get some discipline and focus, and whether that happens because he decides he is going to institutionalize in some way. Early on I drew comparisons between Jordan Peterson and Billy Graham. And what Billy Graham did with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Organization was that organization gave Billy Graham focus to achieve exactly what it was he wanted to achieve. Now, you can do other things along the way, but if you don't have something which is sort of the core, people aren't going to be able to figure out who you are. And there'll be polarization. There's no question about that. And so that in and of itself isn't a reason to not do anything. If polarization is going to scare you, stay out of the public light. But I think if Jordan can figure out how to focus, again, on obviously it's his to decide, but everything that I've heard him say, when he tears up, when he really gets serious, it's about helping individual people have better lives. And that is through all of the stuff that he does. So, for example, his appearance on Lex Fridman, of course, Lex is running it, but the marginalia of Jordan's life became what the conversation was about. Whereas in the Vervaeke Lex Fridman conversation, it was the meaning crisis and what was sort of at the center of John's pursuit. So, yeah, I wanted to do a little bit more talking. Again, thank you for all the comments on the message video makes Jordan weak video. A lot of good conversations, a lot of good responses, both in agreement and disagreement with me. I have no problem, as the book of Proverbs says, you disagreeing with me in a good faith manner blesses me, which is exactly what Jordan is modeling in this video with Greg Hurwitz. So again, as always, leave a comment. Let me know what you think.